So, this is the poster for the show. It was also presented by Lexus. Lexus helped produce financing. We wanted to add, towards the end of the production, we wanted to add some really exciting stuff to the end, and we realized we needed a little bit more cash. So we brought in Lexus as a sponsor to put in a car chase and the explosive fight scene you see towards the end of the series. So here's the trailer. We have sound. Yeah, we do. So what this trailer showcases is how much experimentation we did throughout the series. We started out using all sorts of different cameras. The series was primarily shot on the jaunt, but we also ended up using all sorts of little cameras to capture angles that you couldn't really capture before. When we started working the series, we knew that we wanted to do something different. We were presented with a whole set of rules of how to do VR, how to do 360, how to do this, that, and the other, and we literally just threw them out. We were told you couldn't cut. We were told you couldn't do low angles. We were told you couldn't move fast. Doug looked at it once and then threw it away.
Where's Tetri?
You're like, what?
She's on her way to New York.
I want
That was actually my voice in the series. It's my one cameo.
Girl, listen, Ash,
My SAG
no
credit.
one knows about it. We can do what we want with it.
So it's basically like a DC comic sort of
You know, my
WB
grandfather left a
or
message for me before he
mashup.
died.
Like it's a our
He
CW
said someone
mashup.
was
It's
going to
presented.
kill him.
One of our executive producers, Don Ostrov, was an executive producer at the CW, and so it has this sort of like daytime soap opera feel to it, as well as being a high-action narrative series. It's about a family that has a secret power. The secret power is to be invisible, and they use it to amass a massive amount of wealth over the years. And they're losing it. And then somebody new comes along, and all the violence and excitement that comes from that. It's a 5-episode series. It's 30 minutes, 4K by 4K at 59.94, which of course produces a tremendous amount of data and work and labor. And I'll get to data in a minute, but I'll get into how we started making the show. Again, so we wanted to, our main rule as a company is to never be boring. Everything we need to do, it needs to be entertaining, it needs to be exciting. And we've carried that throughout the series. This is a shot, or a pull from the series from a headset view of the two characters running down an alleyway. This shot was from episode 6, and it was a shot that ended up being the most expensive shot in the series because it was brought in last minute. Again, crazy angles. This shot was hanging a $96,000 camera off the side of a building. That's John Ingstrom, our lighting director up there, rigging it. So we were told you can't do low angle. It's too weird. You can't do small spaces. Be careful for people's personal space. We said whatever. We just need to be exciting and want to do new things. So we did. That's the grave on fire with an invisible body. You can see the outline of it. So when we went into pre-production, we started doing traditional storyboarding. I realized that it just didn't work. It was awkward. It never really portrayed the space. So then we tried doing this 4-column thing that had actions for each little side of the square. When you project 360, it doesn't actually project to a sphere. It's from a square that then gets projected onto a sphere. We realized that was also just not working out. So we started doing cubic crosses. It's a cubic cross as our way of projecting storyboards. So we had the storyboard artist draw each square in, and then we would wrap it out like that, which then turns into that in a headset. And we'd also do a little bit of Unity work and Unreal work to bring in the sets that our designer built in SketchUp and previs them in headset. We also did scans using a Structure.io scanner, and we're able to really visualize what the physical space would look like in each space. It also allowed us to really, really get close on what our stitching might look like. So this is the first scene, which was ultimately cut. A lot of it was cut, including a character that you see in a minute. So this is at the hospital, and an invisible character comes and starts all sorts of mayhem. And this character, that sadly was cut from the series, comes and tries to start to rescue and swings an axe around. Well, first there's a really expensive particle effect that ended up getting cut as well. One of the first VFX meetings was about this effect because doing a particle effect like this with powder or foam was going to be incredibly expensive on top of an invisible person. It ended up just getting cut. And then he starts swinging around this axe, which we ended up losing. I was kind of bummed about that. Axes are kind of fun to swing around in an action movie. But one of the weird things with 360 right now is There isn't a standards board, so it's kind of a matter of like what you can get away with. And so we were told that that might be too violent and might be too intense, which really bummed me out. And you'll see what we replaced it with later, which is still pretty violent. Not an advocate for violence necessarily, but I like action movies. My partner makes action movies. I wouldn't be working with him if he was making romantic comedies. We like action, and we like explosions. So this is what the scene became, which is basically nothing like the storyboards at all.
I'm scared.
This was also that's the only POV shot in the entire series too. It was painful. It's about 495 frames. Shot from a Steadicam. So here's the invisible guy. That replaced the axe. Also had to be cut shorter for the standard board, the non-existent standard board. These bloody footprints that are coming up in a minute were also a bit of argument. We snuck those in. Jump scare. Now what's coming up in a second, one of the things that we're really excited about is we started integrating with comic books. I think the way you look at, it's pretty loud, but I'm okay with that. The way you look at 360 is very similar to the way you look at comic books. So we have this great comic book slice here that was actually flagged as an error when we started processing the footage. It actually caused our delivery to be 3 days late because it was flagged as such an error. And here comes the shot that also was very difficult to get in. Because when you're in 360, that's right in your face. And we actually had to reproject the stereo to get it that close, because in the headset, that face is right in your face. You'll actually see in a second, as we start talking about production, the framing of that shot. So that's that shot. You can see how close the camera is right there. And that's Doug Liman on the right, Jason Diamond to the left, myself above him. So production started over 8 months, 8 long months. We did about 25 full days and probably 10 or 15 quarter and half and whatever days. We started out with this massive crew, 70 people. Look at all these legs. Look at all these paint outs. So I was the post supervisor as well, and so I'm intimately aware of the individual costs of each one of these legs when we were painting them out in the paint-out process. With 360, you start out, you think you're going to need this big crew, and then you realize this big crew gets more and more expensive as they accidentally lean in from the hiding place, or they show themselves in some way, shape. And so we ended up 4 days in. We hadn't seen anything we had done. We were hemorrhaging money building these massive shoots, and Jelena Tatlock, our EP and my partner, said, you know what? She showed up on the 4th day of shooting, showed up set, everybody's having breakfast. Hey, you guys see those vans out there? Everybody's getting in that after breakfast. Show's over. And broke down the show. And we ended up going right into post and started this process that's a very Doug Liman type process where you shoot, and then you edit, and then you shoot, and then you edit, and then you shoot, and then you reshoot, and then you edit, and you keep trying to get better. Part of our philosophy is to constantly iterate and constantly try to make things better and more entertaining. In 360 and VR, I'm just going to say 360 because arguing over what is 360 and VR is just kind of a long-winded, boring argument. We could have it philosophically later, but I'm just going to use VR. A lot of people worry about creating these grandiose ideas of empathy and drawing people in and creating presence. And the problem with that is you're never going to get any of that if your audience isn't entertained. Nobody's going to watch it for longer than 30 seconds if they're bored. And so we kept trying to be more aggressive and do more exciting things. One of the examples I think of is in documentary film, which we've had. There's been so many amazing docs, but one of my favorite docs is Thin Blue Line. I also love some of the docs about the West Memphis 3 by HBO. And the thing about that, those actually got people out of prison. And the thing that's so exciting about that is nobody would have watched that if it was boring. It made an impact, but nobody would have watched it if it was boring. And for some reason, that information hasn't trickled down to the 360 industry. So we cut down, and we moved into this tiny crew. This is one of our wire camera shots. This was pretty experimental and pretty difficult. It started snowing halfway through the shot. That was fun. This is Jelena Tatlock, and I think she stole from Bjork, with an A7S. Early on, we shot everything with an A7S because we were going to use these panels throughout. Ended up getting cut. This is, again, one of those big days, big lights, big paintouts. So then we slimmed down. We went to Haiti with about a 4-person crew. Myself, Jelena Tatlock, our fixer, Paulson, Michael Litwack, one of the other directors, and Alan Bukaria with a jaunt camera. Again, small crew. We were able to move fast, able to get lots of shots, able to get lots of coverage, able to do exciting things quickly, able to iterate. We were able, a big thing is like, if you have to wait every 5 minutes to reset and do this whole long Unity thing, you're not going to be able to get the coverage you're going to need. So we pushed to get more and more coverage for every shot. And with a small crew, we were able to get a shot like that. That shot is in a very dodgy part of Haiti. Our producer actually got his wallet stolen by a 3-year-old as we were shooting that shot. Not kidding. And this was the crew. So that's Avram Ludwig, myself, Jelena Tatlock over my shoulder, John Engstrom, lighting director, and Alan Bukaria. Alan just got back from Bangladesh. He specializes in doing crazy things. He has the unique distinction of being the only person thus far arrested for shooting 360. He caused an international incident last year when he was arrested in Bahrain for shooting 360. That was a fun phone call. I was somehow his emergency contact, but that's another story. So these are the cameras. This is our bling shot. The Ozo was not used, but it was when we bought it. We bought it that day and we figured we might as well throw another $60,000 onto the several $100,000 table of camera equipment. A piece of equipment that maybe none of you guys have seen or are less likely to have seen and probably should get a hold of is the Structure IO structural scanner right there. It's a great piece of gear. We use it to scan whenever we thought we might have a problem with stitching because it creates a small mesh, and it's just an easy way. It's a good starting point to create for your stitching errors and to create CG objects in real time. So this is another shot where we used the Steadicam. This was cut later on, but there's one 495 frame shot that you did see earlier. So there's an accelerometer hidden inside of there, and we paired the accelerometer data of that camera with a front moving camera to try and get a back plate in. It worked okay. So this is about framing. So in 360, your frame is your headset, and different headsets have different frames. So this is us, instead of going like this on set or using a director's viewfinder, you actually use your hands like that. So on April 1st last year, Google released a Google Plexi headset, or supposedly released it, and it was a little headset that was a VR headset that was totally clear. So you could see reality, and I thought that was the best thing ever and started making them for framing. So that's using the Structure IO for a wall that we got a little bit too close to. So we ended up using it to scan that wall, and then when you hand it over to your CG artist and you're stitching and retouching people, they just have a nice starting point. So that's another thing I used on set was a compass. When you track your edits, which I'll get into in a bit later, you need to know where you end your shots. And so you'd call out to the scriptie, okay, points of interest on this last shot were at north and south. Or south, that's unlikely because those are polar opposites, but likely north and northeast. Or you'd call out the degrees to each individual shot. So editing. Editing took place, started January 6th. I think our last cut was placed October 6th or 7th, which is absurd, but very indicative of the way Doug works. He likes to make changes, he likes to move fast, and he likes to change it up to get better and better and better and better and better. So, VR editing. The easiest way to think about VR editing is thinking about a cat with a laser pointer. If you give a cat a laser pointer, they'll follow it. They'll follow it very easily. But in a minute, you'll see I put the laser pointer out of view. I'm also speaking on this track. So you'll see, this is my cat Lola.
But if you keep the laser pointer here, in view,
you can cut and she's fine. But if I cut and rotate improperly,
cut incorrectly behind them,
she can't see it, she can't follow it. You just lost your audience.
Allow your
It's
user,
that simple.
your user
Anybody who tells you you can't edit in VR hasn't ever played with a cat. See, super easy. But if you hide it from her, she'll never follow it. That's your audience. So another way to track that are these overlays. We had these overlays on top of our edits, and so we could track where we're editing. So we're at 90 degrees. These are actually designed for sound, for spatial audio. The better one for editing is that one. So that breaks you up into frame sizes. Each one of those is about the half the size of a headset. And so that gives you a field of view, and you're able to track where people are across frames. Overlay, it looks about like that. So this is an action scene that I'll show you in a minute, where we had 2 points of interest and we played a lot with peripherals. One of the things that really excites me about 360, it's the only visual medium other than arguably architecture and sculpture where you can play with peripherals. And you can really play with guiding people across space. And so these overlays helped us figure out where our peripherals are. So if you figure out that 2 of these are about the size of a headset, or a headset with the Samsung Gear that we were delivering to, you know, the last half is really not that visible. It's in your peripherals. Really, your field of view is just one, but your peripherals make up the edges. So in here, if you take the 2 lines in between 0, that's your center point. I mean, that's your peripherals right there. So you're able to see one fight clearly and see her as she swings her arms into the space. So that's Simon Crane and myself lining up the shots for this scene. Simon Crane took time off of Star Wars to direct this series. He was the second unit director for Rogue One and pretty much every action movie you've ever seen. If you might remember him from GoldenEye, he jumps off of a dam, or in Cliffhanger, he transfers between 2 airplanes. He is a living action figure, and he's an amazing second unit director. And working with him was incredible because he had such a fine-tuned idea of what space is like and how you move physically through space and guide eyes. So I'll show you a bit of his episode. This is my favorite episode in the series. It's the one with the most stuff. Most expensive shot in the series. And obviously this is 360, but it's being projected in a monoscopic equirectangular format. And there we go. Originally we had a Patsy Cline song underneath that, but licensing Patsy Cline is not so cheap. That's actually the closest shot we ever got with a jaunt, and I'll explain why that's exciting. I've got her! Get in there and help the others! So that was the fight scene in episode 6. Thank you, Lexus. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. So we started out with this wide shot, and a big part of this was tracking. This isn't visible in the series. A big part of this was tracking through the space and plotting how they were going to move. Simon and I sat down a lot. It was really difficult to work for them actually because when you're on Star Wars, you sign in your phone, and we had to actually come over. I actually had to go to England to meet with him whenever he got off set. So it starts off here into the most expensive shot in the series. And we move through space, and this is interesting because the series starts kind of with you awkwardly turned to your back. We knew we wanted the fight scene to take place in such a way that you were looking forward the whole time. So we started out this first episode kind of turned backwards, and then used this move to move you forward. Throughout the series, we didn't have too many full 360 turns. We're big fans of what we call couch VR. So that's VR that you make and you can watch sitting on your couch. So then, this completes the turn to facing forwards. And they run into this office, and I wanted this kitchen to feel very normal. And so when we built out the audio, we wanted this bright space, and I wanted to have like a 60s pop song, something very normal. Doug does some really interesting stuff with music and his features. I really like the Respect Yourself sequence in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And so I tried to get a little bit of in there. Obviously, we didn't have the Respect Yourself Aretha Franklin, or not, I can't remember who wrote that song, but that sort of budget. So, this is the beginning of the fight. So we knew we had only had 2 takes to do this because of how much it would cost to destroy the diner every time. So in doing that, we had to plan it out really, really carefully, and we covered it really heavily. So this shot, I think there's about 6 cameras in this shot. So you've got a jaunt in this position, a jaunt behind Avram over there, a GoPro rig on that table, another GoPro rig was down there. There's a GoPro rig underneath the TVs. We also captured the feed from the security cameras, and there's another GoPro rig that's painted out over there. So heavy-duty camera coverage throughout. Here you can actually see, if you look really closely, you can see one of the GoPro rigs on the table. So the scene starts out, and again, remember what I said about peripheral vision. So she's playing into your peripheral here while you're focusing on this right here. The stereo here is also pulling you in to look at that specific spot. So then we jump. See, that was an incorrect slide. So the fight starts for real. And again, her job is to keep track of your peripherals and make sure you're aware of her, because she's a character you're attracted to in the series, and you know her throughout the series, but also to push you back into there. So she's throwing things, and as a viewer, you turn when she's throwing things. You turn to look where she is. So this is interesting. One of the things, again, we're told you can't cut. This is actually a 180 cross as well as being a cut. And we think this cut lands really nicely, because particularly in headset, we did some post-conversion. This is a monoscopic shot we did some post-conversion on. So these donuts fly right at your face. This was shot on a GoPro rig because you couldn't get donuts that close. One of the things as well with these cameras, they use a thing called Stereographic optical flow, which I'll get into in a second. And you can't get that close because the algorithm makes mistakes. So again, she's fighting and you're seeing her, but you're really focusing on this thing right in front of you. Then she gets pulled into here by another invisible person. And this is where I'll start getting into a stereographic optical flow, because this gets interesting. This is the closest shot we've done with an automatic stitching camera, so a camera that uses stereographic optical flow. This is how close that is in a headset. Now, the way stereographic optical flow works in the most simple level is it takes a pixel and it looks at a pixel from 3 cameras, or 4 cameras, or 6 cameras, or 2, and it says, oh, that pixel is here in this camera, and that pixel is here in this camera, and it's here in this camera. That means that it must exist here in space. And then it starts to interpolate and create an image. Now, when we were looking into this, and as a DP, I obsess over technical. I come from a VFX background using virtual cameras and bullet time, and so I really wanted to understand how that works so I could cheat with it. And so this scene, I'm also a bit into history, and so I know that from the First World War, there's this thing called Dazzle Camo, which you guys should look up if you're not familiar with it, because it's the most fabulous of the camos. It's a camouflage that uses all sorts of weird stripes and complex patterns, and the Allies painted their boats with it in the First World War. Now, the reason why they did that is because the Germans, the U-boats, used a thing called stereographic range finding to send out their torpedoes. And what that means is they had 2 telescopes as part of one telescope, 15 feet apart or 5 meters apart, and they were looking at a single object, creating a stereographic image. And what it would say is, oh, if that boat is here in this camera, or in this telescope, and it's here in this camera, it must exist here in space, and I can calculate its velocity. Very similar, or at a most basic level, similar to stereographic optical flow. So, when you make a complex pattern and you break up a shape like stripes on a zebra, you can't really figure out the velocity, and you can't see where the front or back is. And so I reasoned that the same sort of patterns that messed up stereographic range finding would mess up stereographic optical flow. So we use that here, this pattern above them, to push the stereographic optical flow. We also filled the freezer with weird patterns so that the stereographic optical flow would get pushed around outside of them. You can actually see a stitch line break on the edge here, and up into that, where the complex patterns would hide the stitch lines a little bit better than it would be if they were obvious. You can see the stitch line there. Now, in theory, this stitch line should carry vertically down right through her face. But because we use these patterns, the range finding capability, the stereographic optical flow couldn't really figure out the shape of the image. So it threw the stitch around the outside and skipped them, so we were able to get closer. We also pushed them into 2 single lenses so that when they sampled the image from the 2 of them, it would sample him for one lens and him for another lens, and you'd have a nice stereographic pair. Another thing that's exciting about this, as an editor myself, parallel editing is something that happens at the beginning of any sequential art form. If you're able to carry 2 stories and carry your audience using memory across 2 stories that happen simultaneously in time, you're then starting to do something very interesting with storytelling. And as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first instance of parallel editing in 360 video and in VR as a medium. It does happen in video games quite a bit, but in VR and 360, it's the first time I know of. And again, I don't like being the first ever thing. I think that's a really spurious claim that a lot of my competitors and myself often declare. This is the first ever time a 360 camera shot this. It's annoying. But this is the first time I know of, and it's really exciting to me that we've been able to move that art form forward. I think Invisible does that throughout with editing techniques, where we tried to do new things with language, and we tried to bring a cinematic language to 360 video that hadn't really been done before. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I think it's entertaining, and that's where my judgment lies. So they exit. Again, it's really interesting to look at where these stitch lines are going. You can see the stitch lines actually warping her a bit right here. Back in again, and out. Funny little cameo from our director, Simon Crane, hiding against that wall right there. A missed paint out. Now, into VFX and stitching. VFX was performed by The Molecule using Nuke. We also worked a lot with a plugin called Metal for Premiere Pro. The entire project was edited in Premiere Pro and finished in Assimilate Scratch. I don't know if anybody has used Assimilate Scratch. It is a brilliant program that is also incredibly counterintuitive throughout. It's also a really good program, but it's very counterintuitive. Sound was performed by Tin Gedimer, who spoke here. He is... I have trouble speaking about sound in this project because so early on we started partnering with him that I've sort of ceased my knowledge sharing and building on my knowledge of sound and ambisonic sounds, because the work he does is so deeply impactful. If you've ever seen a movie trailer in a movie theater, you've probably heard his work. Most recently he did the trailer for Dunkirk in IMAX. He also did the sound for Star Wars Battlefront. And so the entire series was mixed in ambisonic sound. The soundtrack was even mixed in ambisonic sound. And he is a total genius and incredibly hands-on, and we couldn't be more grateful. One of the things that was really interesting for us completing this project is the visuals, let's all be honest, are a bit lacking. They're not Red cameras, they're not Lexas, it's not what we're used to as audience members, and the headsets make it even worse. But this technology we use for sound, and even the mic, which is a tetracore mic, ambisonic mic, that's been around for a while. We've been using that for a while, since the 70s actually. And so the sound technology is there, and the first time we heard even a rough mix in ambisonics was like seeing the movie for the first time. It was incredible, and actually forced us to make quite a few edit changes at the very last painful minute. Color. Again, color was performed in Assimilate Scratch by Local Hero. They're a house out of Santa Monica. They do brilliant work. This was one of my favorite shots, and probably the most artistic color grade out of the series. We wanted to do this memory scene where I have this theory that you remember your memories in the format of video or film that was most popular at the time your memory occurred. So if you have memories from the 90s, they're likely in VHS in your mind. If you have memories from before then, they might be in 8mm or Super 8. And so this is our Super 8 scene. And we really, actually it's technically not Super 8, it's Kodachrome 16, but who's saying that? We matched Kodachrome color scheme. You can see in the blues and the reds, we matched what color Kodachrome would do, and we're really excited about that scene. This is doing a DFN shot, which was really interesting to do in 360. It's a lot harder than you would expect to do in 360. And that's the end. So you can view the series on Samsung, Jaunt, Condé Nast, Facebook, YouTube. It's all over the place right now. I'd love to hear what you guys think, and if anybody has any questions, please let me know. We used OWC. The Thunder Bays are great. My thing about OWC and Thunder Bays in general is, so for the price of 3 of those, I can get one of their competitors' drives, and let's all be honest, all drives break. I don't care how fancy or how expensive or how rubberized or whatever your stupid drive is. If I drop it in a puddle or if I give it to a grip, it will be broken. There's no way around it. The same guy that breaks my Wacom pens because he thinks it's a Sharpie is gonna drop my hard drive. And I'd rather have 3 of them so that when he drops it, I say, no big deal, because I have 3, than have 1. We also use, my favorite product, actually, my totally favorite product is this little guy. This thing's awesome because I have it as part of my daily kit because you can pull out SSDs, and I've tried every single hard drive reader on the market on Amazon.com and on Newegg, and it's the fastest by quite a bit. You can get up to 1,300 MBs, I think, and it's fast, and it's awesome, and it's useful for when you're really in a bind and you just need to drop in a hard drive or repair a hard drive. We use these things in Haiti as well, which was really difficult running off of a generator and UPSs. We had a chain of UPSs that we ran into the generator so that we could get an hour and a half of power while we were dumping our data. Remember, these things are 4K by 4K, 5994. A single frame is about 123 megabytes. Our master file ended up being about 25 terabytes. Then you have to back that up. All of our storage for this project, the first master was about 123 terabytes, which was a bummer. It's a lot of storage, and when you're a paranoid person like me who thinks that everything's going to get broken and thinks that your desk is going to break, or I grew up in California and I'm paranoid about earthquakes even though I live in New York now. It's coming. The big one's coming. I want things backed up in multiple formats, and it's much better to have 3 backups than just 1. And they're also fast, and they're quick, and they're easy. And the other better thing that we actually ran into in Haiti was the cable on that hard drive is an AC cable. It's the same cable you use in your air conditioner, the same cable you use in your microwave. And when you forget to bring one, oops, or when TSA takes one, oops, you just pull one out of the back of the microwave and use it. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Today's top story, Dr. Richard Ashland, CEO of Ashland Agriculture, died in his home in Greenwich, Connecticut.
They are an incredibly secretive family that has shied away from public scrutiny, usually behind layers of publicists, and carefully manage media relationships.
I, Dr. Richard Ashland, being of sound mind, have chosen to leave my entire fortune to my granddaughter Tatiana Ashland.
Where's Tatiana?
She's on her way to New York.
I want you to do something for me.
That girl is an ash and no one knows about her. We can do what we want with her. She's the key to our future.
You know, my grandfather left a message for me before he died. He said someone was going to kill him.
He was delusional.